When Caleb Mercer walked into the Ashwick County Sheriff's substation, he did not look like a man trying to perform grief. He looked like a man who had run out of places to stand. It was 7:43 on a January morning, the kind of morning when frost turned the courthouse lawn pale and the windows of parked cars had to be scraped with credit cards and sleeves. Caleb came in through the side door because the front steps were still glazed with ice. He wore work boots dusted white with dried compound, a navy coat zipped wrong, and a gray knit hat pulled low over his ears. His hand shook so hard that the deputy at the counter first thought he was cold. Then Caleb opened his mouth, tried to speak, and made only a thin sound. "My wife didn't come home," he said. Deputy Dane Rourke put down his coffee. Caleb swallowed, closed his eyes, and forced the rest of the sentence out in pieces. Naomi had left the house the night before after an argument. She had taken her gray Subaru. She had said she needed air. She had done this before, he admitted. Not often, but enough that he had waited before calling. That was the part he seemed ashamed of. He said he had spent most of the night dialing her phone, driving the back roads, standing on their porch under the yellow light, and listening for the Subaru's engine. At dawn, when the calls began going straight to voicemail, he had driven to the station. He had brought proof of worry rather than proof of a crime. A photograph of Naomi in her green winter coat, her medical insurance card, the number of her phone, the plate number of her Subaru written on the back of an electric bill. He also brought a small cotton scarf he said she had left on the banister, though nobody asked him for it. He kept pressing it flat on the counter with both palms, as if the scarf might drift away. The first report was written in the quiet half-light of the front office, while the dispatcher's radio clicked and a snowplow scraped past on Barron Street. Caleb spoke in a raw, obedient voice. Naomi Mercer, 33 years old, 5'6", brown hair cut to her shoulders, hazel eyes, a small crescent scar near her left thumb from a kitchen knife. Married to Caleb for 7 years. No children. Worked part-time in the county building compliance office and taught piano to 3 students on Wednesday afternoons. Last seen at approximately 10:18 p.m., leaving their house at 19 Juniper Road after a private marital argument. "What was the argument about?" Deputy Rourke asked. Caleb looked down. "Money," he said. "The house. Everything, I guess. I'm not proud of it." He did not make himself clean in the statement. That was one reason people believed him. He said he had raised his voice. He said Naomi had cried. He said she had accused him of not listening. He said she had put on her coat, taken her keys from the blue bowl by the door, and told him not to follow. He said he followed anyway after 20 minutes because he was scared. He said he could not find her. The deputy asked what Naomi had with her. "Her phone, wallet, car keys, her wedding ring," Caleb said. "She always wore it." That detail became important much later. At the time, it was only another line in the report. By 9:10 that morning, Naomi's Subaru had been located in the public lot below Echo Ridge, 6 miles north of town. The doors were locked. The driver's seat was pulled farther back than Naomi usually drove it, though that meant little because Caleb used the car sometimes. Her purse was gone. Her phone was not inside. There was a smear of road salt on the floor mat, 1 empty paper cup in the console, and a folded receipt from Henson's grocery dated the afternoon before. On the fence beside the first trail marker, a strip of green cloth clung to a splinter, the same shade as the coat Naomi wore in the photo Caleb had handed over. Echo Ridge was a bad place to leave a car in January. The path climbed through dark pine, crossed a service road, then narrowed beside old quarry cuts, half hidden by brush and snow. Below the ridge, the abandoned limestone pit held water that looked black even at noon. Hikers used the place in summer. Teenagers drank there on weekends. In winter, it belonged to ravens, wind, and people who wanted not to be seen. Within hours, the search began. Caleb did exactly what people expected a frightened husband to do. He answered questions. He gave officers Naomi's toothbrush and hairbrush for identification if they needed it. He called her mother, Hazel Vero, and her younger brother, Toma, before the sheriff's office could reach them. He walked the first half-mile of the trail with searchers until Sergeant Pilar Ives told him to go home because his boot prints were making the track work harder. He went as far as the road, then stopped and turned back, his face changed by the sight of strangers moving through the trees, calling his wife's name. By sunset, Ashwick knew. The Mercers were not famous people. Caleb installed floors, restored porches, patched rentals, and had a reputation for showing up when he said he would. Naomi had a softer public shape. She processed occupancy complaints at the county annex, played hymns at 2 winter funerals when the church pianist broke her wrist, and once stopped a landlord from moving a widow into a unit with a dead furnace. People knew them in the partial way small towns know married couples. They knew the kind of truck Caleb drove. They knew Naomi bought carnations instead of roses because, she said, roses gave up too quickly. They knew the yellow porch light at 19 Juniper Road stayed on whenever one of them was coming home late. That light burned for 13 straight nights. The first theory was exposure. Naomi had walked into the ridge after the argument, slipped near one of the quarry cuts, and been covered by snow. The second theory was abduction. A woman alone in a dark lot, a road through timber, a car found neat and empty. The third theory took shape after a volunteer named Esme Brill remembered seeing Harlan Joss, a former subcontractor, near the trailhead the night before Naomi vanished. Harlan was easy for the town to fear. He was 46, broad-shouldered, and angry in the way men become when their anger has been useful to them too many times. Caleb had fired him from 2 renovation jobs the previous autumn. Naomi had filed a compliance note on one of those jobs after a tenant complained about soft stairs and exposed wiring. 3 weeks before she disappeared, Harlan had shouted at Naomi in the county annex parking lot. 2 people heard enough to turn around. One heard him say, "You don't know what he's doing." Another heard, "You'll be sorry you put your name on that." Both remembered the words differently, but both remembered Naomi standing still beside her car, chin raised, while Harlan walked away. When deputies found Harlan's old green pickup parked outside a bar on Route 11 with mud on the tires and a missing passenger side mirror, suspicion hardened around him. He admitted he had been at Echo Ridge on the night Naomi disappeared, but said he had gone there to sleep because his girlfriend had thrown him out. He said he saw Naomi's car, but never saw Naomi. He also said Caleb Mercer was a liar. That last statement did not help him. For 3 weeks, the investigation had heat. Divers went into the quarry pond and came out shaking, their gloves filmed with black silt. Search dogs worked along the ridge until the snow thawed and refroze. Volunteers in orange vests moved through cedar breaks and drainage ditches. The local paper ran Naomi's photograph under the headline, "Still Missing After Argument." Caleb sat for an interview on WKLN with his hands folded and his eyes red but dry. "I keep thinking the last thing she heard from me was my worst voice," he said. "I just want her home. Whatever happened, whoever knows something, please let us bring her home." That sentence played on the evening news and turned him, in the public imagination, into a man punished by his last words. It made room for his shame. It made his waiting feel honest. Hazel Vero did not cry in public. Naomi's mother had worked 31 years at the mail counter inside Beale's pharmacy, where she could tell by the angle of someone's shoulders whether they had come in for stamps or sympathy. She was 62 when Naomi vanished, narrow-faced, careful with money, and stubborn about details. On the 3rd day of the search, she asked Sergeant Ives why her daughter would have taken the ridge trail in town shoes. On the 5th day, she asked why Naomi's seat was set for someone taller. On the 8th, she asked Caleb why, if Naomi had left after crying, there had been no tissues in the car, No makeup on the sleeve of the coat strip. No mark of her in that cold little vehicle, except a receipt from the day before. Caleb listened to Hazel's questions, as if each one hurt him because he deserved it. "I don't know," he said. "I wish I did." Pilar Ives remembered that. She remembered the way he never snapped at Hazel. Guilty people often resent questions. Innocent people sometimes do too. Caleb seemed to accept them like stones placed in his pockets. The case moved through winter, then into the long thaw. By March, the ridge had been searched in widening circles. By April, the quarry pond had given up only beer cans, a rusted bicycle frame, and a deer carcass. By May, Harlan Joss had been questioned 7 times, polygraphed once, and arrested on an unrelated warrant for unpaid fines, which made half the town sure the sheriff had missed something, and the other half sure Harlan had gotten away with murder. By June, Naomi's file had grown thick with maps, call logs, bank statements, and photographs of places where she was not. No one found her phone. No one used her cards. No one saw her on a bus camera, or at a motel desk, or in a hospital waiting room. Her social accounts stayed untouched. Her piano students kept their lesson books in a stack by the upright, in the Mercer's living room, until Caleb finally called their parents and said gently that they should come pick them up. The house on Juniper Road became a kind of shrine by accident. People left candles on the porch rail until the wind blew wax down the steps. Someone hung a laminated missing poster on the maple tree out front. Caleb kept the porch light on. He also kept working, because grief did not pay the mortgage, and because he said the silence inside the house was worse when his hands were empty. 2 days after Naomi was reported missing, he had called a plumber about a leak in the kitchen wall. A pipe had frozen, he said, and water had buckled the old maple floor near the pantry. He tore up the boards himself, dried the subfloor, and installed new white oak before the end of the week. At the time, no one cared about the floor. A sheriff's deputy came through the house that first week, looking for Naomi's passport, her laptop, and a small notebook Hazel said her daughter carried everywhere. He stepped over stacked boards in the kitchen. Caleb apologized for the mess. The deputy wrote in his notes that the kitchen was under repair due to water damage. He did not take photographs of the exposed boards. He did not ask why Caleb, who could barely sleep, had chosen that week to run a saw in the room where his wife had made coffee every morning. People do practical things under shock. They fix fences after funerals. They wash dishes while waiting for medical examiners. They replace ruined flooring because ruined flooring, unlike a missing wife, offers instructions. 18 months later, a home inspector named Ruth Packer found the ring. By then, Naomi had become a tense absence rather than breaking news. Her missing posters had faded from green to bluish gray. Harlan Joss had moved 2 towns over and still walked with his fists closed. Hazel had stopped answering calls from strangers who claimed they had dreamed of Naomi near water. Caleb had taken his wedding band off and put it back on enough times that people stopped watching his hand. He had decided to sell the Juniper Road house, telling friends there were too many ghosts in the walls. The buyers were a young couple from Liddell, teachers with a baby due in October. During the inspection, Ruth noticed a slight lift in the kitchen floor beside the pantry threshold. She was not alarmed at first. White oak moved in heat. Old houses breathed, but when she pressed the toe of her boot against one board, the board clicked and settled as if there were a hollow underneath. Caleb stood behind her with his arms crossed. "That patch has been a headache," he said. "Freeze leak the winter before last. I replaced it fast, probably too fast." Ruth had heard about Naomi Mercer. Everyone in Ashwick had. She had no reason to connect a lifted floor with a missing woman. She simply wrote, "Floor movement near pantry. Recommend contractor review." The buyers asked for repair before closing. Caleb, wanting the sale, agreed. The contractor he hired was not a friend. That mattered. Milo Quent had moved to Ashwick 9 months earlier, and knew the Mercer case only as a sad story told in checkout lines. He arrived on a bright, airless August afternoon with a pry bar, knee pads, and a portable fan. Caleb said he had an estimate across town and left Milo alone with a key. The house was almost empty, furniture pushed into the front room, walls marked by pale rectangles where photographs had hung. The yellow porch light was still screwed into its fixture, though it was daylight and nobody needed guiding home. Milo pulled the shoe molding first, then he lifted the first board, then the second. Under the planks was rosin paper, a thin seam of dried adhesive, and the older subfloor, patched in 2 places with plywood. He was cutting away a warped strip near the pantry when the ring dropped. It did not glitter. It made a small, hard tick against the metal lip of his shop vacuum and rolled into a drift of sawdust. Milo almost threw it away with the debris. He thought it was a brass washer, then a curtain grommet. He picked it up between 2 dusty fingers and saw the shape, the warm color under gray powder, the narrow band worn thin on one side. Inside was an engraving, partly packed with grime. He rubbed it once with his thumb and stopped because the letters were there. NM, always home. Milo stood in Caleb Mercer's empty kitchen, holding a wedding ring in the hot air, while the fan turned slowly behind him. He called Ruth Packer first because her name was on the inspection sheet. Ruth told him to put the ring down and call the sheriff. He set it on a clean paper towel, then, after thinking better, overturned a plastic bucket beside it, so no dust would fall on top. When Deputy Rourke arrived, Milo was waiting on the porch with both hands visible, as if he had been caught stealing from the dead. Pilar Ives was no longer a sergeant by then. She had been promoted to lieutenant, though she still kept Naomi's file in the cabinet behind her desk instead of sending it to the archive room downstairs. She drove to Juniper Road herself. The ring sat on the pantry floor under the bucket. She recognized it before anyone confirmed the engraving. Naomi wore it in nearly every photograph. It was a plain gold band, slightly wider than fashion, because she had asked the jeweler for something she could wear while playing piano and sorting county files and loading groceries without feeling it catch. In the engagement photo Caleb had supplied, Naomi's hand rested on his chest, the band bright against his blue shirt. In the missing poster, enlarged from a family picnic, the same band circled the hand holding a paper plate. Pilar crouched, looked at the lifted boards, the sawdust, the old subfloor, the dark gap where a board had been nailed down for 1.5 years. She did not touch the ring. For a moment, the whole case seemed to tilt toward the house. Caleb was at a rental duplex on Pignon Street when the deputies found him. He was kneeling by a stair tread with a drill in his hand. Pilar watched him stand and read her face before she said anything. His first reaction was not confusion. It was calculation so brief that someone who had not spent years in interview rooms might have missed it. His eyes moved from Pilar to the deputy, to the street behind them, then back. "We found Naomi's wedding ring," Pilar said. His mouth opened. "Where?" "In your kitchen, under the floorboards you installed after she disappeared." He sat down on the unfinished stair. The drill hung from one hand. "That's not possible," he said. The sentence came too fast. Back at the station, Caleb explained that Naomi sometimes took her ring off to knead dough or clean paintbrushes. Maybe it had slipped years ago. Maybe it had fallen under the old floor through a gap. Maybe the engraving would prove nothing because the ring had always been in the house. He sounded wounded that the discovery had been brought to him like an accusation. Pilar let him talk. "On the morning you reported Naomi missing," she said, "you told Deputy Rourke she left wearing it. I assumed she did. You said she always wore it. She did. You said she took it with her. I was upset. She had vanished from your home less than 10 hours earlier. You gave a detailed list of what she had with her: phone, wallet, car keys, wedding ring." Caleb rubbed his forehead, leaving a pale streak of dust. I made a mistake. Maybe, Pilar said. The forensic report made that harder to believe. The ring had been found below the new oak, above the old subfloor, embedded in a seam of adhesive and sanding dust from the January repair. The underside carried a trace of blue chalk powder, matching the layout line Caleb used when installing the floor. A thin film of water-based polyurethane had dried along one edge, the same finish used on the boards. The ring had not been lying under the original floor for years. It had been trapped during the replacement. There was also a small, flattened dent across the band. The lab could not say when it was made, only that pressure had bent the gold against something hard and straight, consistent with being struck or pressed near the edge of a board. Inside the engraving, packed beneath the grime, was a dark residue too degraded to identify quickly. Pilar did not need the lab to tell her what mattered first. The ring had been in the kitchen after Caleb said Naomi had left. The case reopened without announcement. Pilar did not want news trucks in front of the Mercer house before she knew what the ring meant. She took Naomi's file home that night and spread it across her dining table. Her husband, who had learned not to ask about certain silences, set a plate beside her and left the room. She read the old statements in order, not searching for lies, but for seams. Caleb had reported the argument at 10:18. Neighbor Laurel Venn had heard a car door at 10:25, but had not looked outside. A tower north of town had caught Naomi's phone at 11:04 near Echo Ridge. At 11:17, the phone had sent a text to Caleb. "I just need quiet. Don't make everyone stare at us." At 11:42, Caleb had called Naomi, and the call had gone unanswered. At 12:03, her phone connected briefly to the same tower, then disappeared. The Subaru had been found locked in the lot. No usable prints beyond Naomi and Caleb. No clear shoe prints, because volunteers had arrived before the scene was fully sealed. The green cloth on the fence matched Naomi's coat, but could not be dated. Harlan Joss had admitted sleeping in his truck less than a mile away. Caleb's own truck, a white box-bodied Ford with Mercer floors and finish printed in black on the side, had allegedly been parked behind his workshop all night. His employee, Silas Mott, had said he saw it there when he drove past at 1 a.m. after leaving his girlfriend's apartment. Pilar wrote Silas Mott on a yellow pad and circled it. The next morning, she found him in a cabinet shop in Bracken Mill, thinner than his old license photo, with a healed burn across one wrist and the defensive cheer of someone who had been sober long enough to fear every question. He remembered the night, because everyone remembered the night Naomi Mercer vanished. He also remembered telling Deputy Rourke that Caleb's truck was at the shop. "Was it?" Pilar asked. Silas looked at the table between them. "I thought it was." "You thought." "I saw the back corner of it from the street. Or I saw something white. I was drinking then." "Did Caleb ask you to say you saw it?" Silas rubbed his wrist. "He called me before the deputy came. Said they were trying to make a timeline. Said if anyone asked, I passed the shop and the truck was there because it was. Said he didn't want them wasting time on him when Naomi was out there freezing." "Did that feel like a request or a reminder?" Silas closed his eyes. "At the time, a reminder. Now? I don't know." Pilar did not push him until he broke. She had learned that some witnesses lied out of loyalty and some out of fear, but many lied because a confident person handed them a memory before they could examine their own. Caleb had handed Silas a memory. He had handed the town one too. The new timeline moved slowly. There was no single revelation that shattered everything. There were only little corrections, each one forcing the next. The plumber Caleb claimed had inspected the frozen pipe had never entered the house. He had spoken to Caleb by phone and said it sounded like a supply line, but he was booked for 3 days. Caleb had paid cash at Harrow Supply the next morning for rosin paper, a 5-pound box of flooring cleats, polyurethane, and 2 sheets of half-inch plywood. The receipt listed the time as 6:11 a.m., less than 90 minutes before he reported Naomi missing. Caleb had explained it in the old file as materials already needed for a scheduled job. No one had asked why the plywood measurements matched the patches in his own kitchen. The water department showed no spike at 19 Juniper Road, no service call, no complaint of a burst pipe. The neighbor on the west side, Laurel Venn, had given a vague statement in the first week because she hated attention and had a son on probation. 18 months later, with Pilar sitting at her kitchen table and the ring in an evidence photograph between them, Laurel admitted she had heard tools after midnight. "What kind of tools?" Pilar asked. "A compressor," Laurel said. "That little cough and hiss. Then a nail gun. I know because my brother put in trim all summer and it drove me crazy." "What time?" "Late enough that I got mad. After 1, maybe closer to 2. I remember because I thought, he's lost his mind, doing that with his wife missing. But then the paper said he didn't call until morning, and I thought maybe it was the night after. I get days mixed." "Did you tell anyone?" Laurel looked toward the hallway where her adult son's boots sat by the wall. "I told my sister. She said don't get involved unless I was sure. I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure." But she was sure about the sound. Compressor. Nail gun. A man working in a kitchen after midnight, while his wife was supposedly driving toward the ridge. Pilar returned to the phone records with a cold patience that felt almost like anger. The original tower map had been broad, a pale circle covering Echo Ridge, the quarry road, and part of the highway. In the first investigation, that had seemed enough. Naomi's phone had been near the ridge. Naomi's car was found at the ridge. Therefore, Naomi had been near the ridge. Now Pilar asked for a fresh extraction from Caleb's old phone, preserved in evidence after the first week, but never fully analyzed because he was a cooperative spouse, not a suspect. The phone was outdated, cracked, and stubborn. It took a state analyst named Bren Vale 4 days to pull a complete Bluetooth log from it. The log showed Caleb's phone connecting automatically to the Ford truck's hands-free unit at 10:52 p.m. on the night Naomi disappeared, then disconnecting at 11:09 near the Ridge Tower, then reconnecting at 11:28 as it moved south again. Caleb had told deputies he was home between 10:40 and 11:30, calling Naomi and waiting. The truck had not been home. The tower data did not prove Naomi was in it. It did not prove Caleb had parked her Subaru, but it proved his first timeline was false. When Pilar confronted him a second time, he had prepared better. He brought an attorney from Liddell, a woman with a silver bob and a habit of finishing his sentences before he could damage himself. Caleb said he had driven toward Echo Ridge because he was searching for Naomi and had been embarrassed to admit he disobeyed her request not to follow. He said he turned around when he did not see her car. He said he later found out where it was and panicked because he thought the police would blame him for not calling sooner. "Why install a kitchen floor before reporting your wife missing?" Pilar asked. His attorney touched his sleeve. "I bought materials before I reported her missing," Caleb said. "I didn't install them before. Laurel Venn heard tools after 1 in the morning. Laurel hates me. She complained about my saw for years. She said compressor and nail gun. Then she heard something else. The ring was under the floor. I can't explain that." Pilar leaned forward. "You explain everything else." For the first time, Caleb looked at her with open dislike. The motive hid where motives often hide, not in one grand secret, but in paperwork nobody had wanted to read, while search teams were in the woods. Naomi's job at the county annex sounded minor from the outside. She stamped forms, logged complaints, routed inspection requests. But she knew permits the way other people knew birthdays. She knew which landlords delayed repairs, which contractors submitted clean photographs from dirty jobs, which inspectors looked too quickly, and which ones looked twice. 4 months before she vanished, a 78-year-old tenant named Annabelle Rusk had fallen through a weakened porch step at a duplex Caleb had repaired. She broke her hip and never returned to the apartment. The official repair invoice said Mercer Floors and Finish had replaced all exterior treads with treated lumber and installed anti-slip nosing. The photographs attached to the invoice showed perfect boards, new screws, clean paint. Naomi had processed the occupancy renewal. Then Annabelle's daughter came to the annex with pictures on her phone showing the actual steps, patched, soft, and painted over. Naomi pulled the file. Then she pulled another. Then another. By December, she had a folder in her desk containing 6 properties where Caleb had billed owners or insurers for work that had been done cheaply, partially, or not at all. He had reused photographs. He had signed subcontractor names to forms. He had let tenants move back into units that should have stayed empty. Harlan Joss, the angry former subcontractor, had not threatened Naomi because she caught him. He had tried to warn her that Caleb was worse than a sloppy contractor. Pilar found the folder because Hazel remembered the notebook. "My daughter kept a gray notebook," Hazel said. "Cloth cover, elastic band. She wrote everything. Recipes, phone numbers, things she wanted to ask people. Caleb told me he couldn't find it. It was not in Naomi's desk. It was not in her car, her nightstand, or the boxes Caleb had packed after deciding to sell the house. But a clerk at the county annex remembered Naomi staying late on the last afternoon anyone saw her alive, photocopying permit files with the copier lid raised because the binders were too thick. The clerk also remembered Naomi leaving with the copies in a brown accordion folder. The folder was missing too. The old false lid around Harlan began to unravel. The shouting in the parking lot sounded different when people heard the full sentence. "You don't know what he's doing. You'll be sorry you put your name on that." Harlan had not been threatening Naomi with harm. He had been warning her that Caleb would use her signature, her office, and her trust to make the records look legitimate. Harlan resisted helping when Pilar found him in a trailer outside Wexford. He had spent 18 months as the town's favorite monster. His mother stopped going to the grocery store on Sundays because people stared. His old boss stopped calling. He had lost weight and several teeth, and most of his patience. "You people had my boots in evidence for a month," he said. "You think I'm going to sit here and make you feel better?" "No," Pilar said. "I think Naomi may have been trying to prove what you tried to tell her." That quieted him. He eventually gave her a thumb drive wrapped in electrical tape. He had kept it in a coffee can because he did not trust computers, police, or his own temper. On it were photographs from Caleb's jobs. Hollow core doors billed as solid, laminate scraps installed where waterproof flooring had been paid for, rotten joists hidden under fresh trim. There was also a video, 6 minutes long, filmed from Harlan's phone inside a vacant duplex. Caleb's voice could be heard off-screen saying, "The county sees paper. The owners see paint. Nobody crawls under a porch unless somebody gets hurt." Harlan said he had shown the video to Naomi. She had not believed it at first. Then she had started checking. "Did Caleb know?" Pilar asked. "He knew she was looking," Harlan said. "He asked me if I was trying to make his wife hate him. I told him he was doing fine by himself." The hidden backstory changed the marriage. Not for the town at first, because the town still saw the porch light and the television interview, but for the investigators, who now read Caleb's grief through another lens. Naomi had not left because of a vague marital argument. She had been gathering evidence against her husband. She had scheduled a meeting with a state housing investigator for the morning after she disappeared. The appointment was buried in the investigator's calendar under N. Mercer, county file irregularities. He had canceled it as a no-show and forgotten her name until Pilar called. She had also signed a lease on a small apartment above a dentist's office in Liddell. The landlord had held it for a week, then rented it to a dental assistant after Naomi never came with the deposit. In her email drafts, recovered from a county server, Naomi had written a message to Caleb she never sent. "I am not trying to ruin you. I am trying to stop being part of it. I will not sign another form. I will not lie to people who have to live on the floors you cover." The draft ended there. Pilar printed it and sat with it for a long time. A missing person can become two people in an investigation: the person lost to the family and the person slowly built from records. Naomi, in the first year, had been built from Caleb's version: emotional, overwhelmed, humiliated by an argument, prone to needing air. Naomi in the second investigation became sharper, less convenient. She checked dates. She kept copies. She planned exits quietly. She warned tenants not to use stairs until repairs were confirmed. She loved Caleb once, but she had stopped confusing love with obedience. The ring under the floor was no longer just a clue. It was the first physical proof that Caleb's story had started inside the house and then been carried into the woods. Still, proof of a lie wasn't proof of murder. The prosecutor reminded Pilar of that every time she called. They needed Naomi, or they needed Caleb to lead them to what remained of her. Pilar went back to the house on Juniper Road with a forensic team and a warrant. The buyers withdrew their offer the same day. Caleb's realtor cried in the driveway, partly from stress and partly because she had once brought lasagna after Naomi vanished. Technicians removed the pantry floorboard by board. They photographed the cleat lines, the patch seams, the old stains that had been sanded, sealed, and hidden. Chemical tests revealed faint traces of blood in the seams near the threshold. Too little and too degraded to prove violence alone. Enough to prove Caleb had lied when he said the floor had only suffered water damage. Behind the pantry wall, inside a cavity opened during the old repair, they found a strip of green wool caught on a nail. It matched Naomi's coat. In the crawlspace below, buried in dust and mouse droppings, they found 2 missing pages from a county permit file. One bore Naomi's handwriting in the margin. Ask State. Caleb cannot be listed as inspector contact. Hazel came to the house while the technicians were still carrying evidence bags down the steps. Pilar tried to keep her back, but Hazel stood on the sidewalk and stared at the kitchen window as if the wall had become transparent. "Was she there?" Hazel asked. "We don't know everything yet." But was she there? Pilar could not give comfort by lying. "Yes," she said. "At some point after Caleb said she left, she was in that kitchen." Hazel nodded once. Her face did not change. Then she walked to the maple tree and tore the faded missing poster down with both hands. The public reversal came harder than Pilar expected. People who had prayed with Caleb did not want to feel foolish. People who had cursed Harlan did not want to apologize to him. Some said the ring could have been planted. Some said Naomi might have hidden it herself before running away. Some said Pilar was reopening old wounds for career reasons. Caleb released a statement through his attorney saying he welcomed answers, loved his wife, and had been treated as guilty because he was the last person brave enough to tell the truth about their troubled marriage. For a week, the town split along the fault line of its own embarrassment. Then came the fuel record. Harrow Supply had old transaction logs that listed not only Caleb's purchase of flooring materials at 6:11 a.m., but also a declined card attempt at 3:38 a.m. at Brindle's Fuel, 18 miles south, on the highway toward Alder Spur. The clerk on duty that night had long since moved, but the station owner had archived exterior camera footage on a dusty server because he was too cheap to replace it and too suspicious to delete anything. The footage was grainy, greenish, and nearly useless until the state lab stabilized it. At 3:41 a.m., Caleb's white box truck pulled beside Pump 3. The driver wore a dark coat and kept his head down. The passenger side of the truck was not visible, but the back roll-up door was secured with a red strap Caleb used in every work photograph. The truck remained for 4 minutes. The driver paid cash. When he walked to the window, the camera caught his left hand. No wedding band. Caleb had removed his ring before the television interview. He had told people he could not bear the feel of it. The footage showed him without it, hours before he ever reported Naomi missing. Alder Spur was a name from the county's old quarry days, a road that ran between shuttered lime sheds, scrub pine, and 3 foreclosed houses, waiting for someone to decide whether they were worth repairing. Caleb had worked there in December on a bank-owned bungalow, replacing subfloor after a sewage backup. He had keys, he had access, he had privacy. More importantly, he had poured a small utility pad behind the bungalow, claiming the old one had cracked. The invoice was dated 2 days after Naomi disappeared. A cadaver dog named Finch worked the property in a steady cold rain. The handler moved slowly, letting the dog circle the shed, the back steps, the low rectangle of concrete behind the utility room. Finch stopped at the pad and sat. No one spoke for several seconds. The excavation took most of a day. There are ways to tell that part of the story without lingering where cruelty has already done enough. The concrete was thin. Beneath it was a capped cistern from a time before the road had proper lines, hidden under gravel and root mats. Investigators found Naomi Mercer there, wrapped in the green wool coat Caleb had described, along with the brown accordion folder he had taken from her. The folder had been damaged by moisture, but some pages survived inside a plastic sleeve. Permit copies, photographs, Harlan's printed emails, and 3 handwritten notes in Naomi's square, careful script. One note read, "C says everyone does this." Not true. Hazel identified the coat first. Toma identified the scar near the thumb because Hazel could not. Caleb was arrested before dusk at a motel outside Lytle, where deputies found him with $600 in cash, his passport, and a half-packed duffel bag. His attorney later said he had not been fleeing, he had been overwhelmed. The jury, months later, would hear that and see the passport in a plastic evidence sleeve. The interview after his arrest lasted 11 hours, but only the last 20 minutes mattered. For most of it, Caleb stayed with the story that had carried him for 18 months. Naomi left. Naomi drove away. He searched. He panicked. He repaired the floor because water damage did not wait for grief. He had gone to Alder Spur that night to check a job because he could not sleep. The ring could have been anywhere. The blood could have come from Naomi cutting her hand weeks earlier. The folder meant nothing because Naomi often carried work home. Every fact, when isolated, had a small door through which he tried to escape. Pilar closed those doors one at a time. She showed him the Bluetooth log. She showed him Laurel's statement. She showed him the Harrow supply receipt. She showed him the fuel footage. She showed him the ring, enlarged until the polyurethane ridge looked like a frozen wave. She showed him the note from Naomi's draft email. She did not show him photographs from the cistern. She did not need to. He already knew what was there. At 9:27 p.m., Caleb stopped answering. He leaned back in the metal chair, eyes fixed on a dent in the interview room table. His face had gone slack with exhaustion, or with the loss of the version of himself he had been defending. She was going to destroy everything, he said. Pilar waited. She didn't understand. Those people wanted cheap work until something went wrong. Owners wanted forms signed. Inspectors wanted clean files. Harlan wanted revenge. Naomi thought there was this clean line. Like you step on one side and you're honest, step on the other and you're a criminal. She didn't know what it costs to keep a business alive. What happened in the kitchen? He rubbed both hands over his face. For a second, Pilar saw him as he must have looked that first morning, pale under fluorescent light, arranging shock into sentences. She came home late, he said. She had the folder. She said she had an appointment in the morning. She said she was leaving me. Not later. Not after counseling. Leaving. She put the lease on the table like she was showing me a receipt for groceries. His voice sharpened at the memory, then dulled again. I took the folder. She grabbed for it. She hit the pantry door. I didn't mean for her to fall like that. Pilar did not accept the invitation to make it smaller. What did you do then? Caleb stared at the table. She was breathing. The room changed. Even the recording device seemed louder. I thought about calling, he said. I did. I had my phone in my hand. Then I saw the papers everywhere. The permit copies, Harlan's pictures, her notes, my name. I thought, if I call, it's over. Everything I built, gone in one night because she wanted to be righteous. So you staged Echo Ridge. I didn't know what else to do. That was the closest he came to naming the choice. He described taking Naomi's phone, driving the Subaru to the ridge, sending the text, tearing the cloth on the fence. He moved his own truck later, carrying Naomi to Alderspur before dawn. He bought flooring materials on the way back because, he said, he could not stand looking at the kitchen. He tore up the boards, sanded the threshold, patched the subfloor, and laid new oak while the house was still warm from the night before. Somewhere in that frantic work, Naomi's wedding ring slipped from the debris, from her hand, or from the cuff of the coat he had dragged across the floor. He heard nothing. He saw nothing. He nailed the floor over it. For 18 months, his wife's ring lay under his feet while he made coffee, accepted casseroles, answered reporters, and stood beside Hazel beneath the porch light. That detail was not in the confession. Pilar understood it later, walking through the empty house one final time. The kitchen had no furniture, no curtains, no evidence markers anymore. Only pale lines showed where cabinets had stood. She stood by the pantry and imagined the ring below the boards through winter, spring, summer, another winter, and part of another summer. Not hidden in a vault, not thrown into water, not buried far away at first, just under the ordinary surface of the life Caleb kept pretending to live. The trial did not give the town the clean satisfaction people had expected. Caleb's attorney argued accident, panic, and obstruction rather than premeditated murder. The prosecutor argued that every action after Naomi was injured showed consciousness, calculation, and a willingness to let her die to protect himself. Medical testimony could not answer every question because 18 months had stolen too much. The jury did not get certainty about each minute in the kitchen. They got the ring, they got the phone data, they got the floor repair, they got the cistern, they got Caleb's own sentence. She was breathing. Hazel sat through all of it in the second row. She did not look at Caleb when he entered. She looked only at the evidence screen when Naomi's handwriting appeared. Toma came twice and left both times before lunch. Harlan Joss testified in a clean shirt that did not fit his neck and kept his eyes on the floor while the prosecutor played the video he had taken. When asked why he had not gone to police sooner, he said, "Because I thought nobody would believe a man like me over a man like him." No one in the courtroom moved. Caleb was convicted of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, obstruction, and multiple fraud charges related to the county repair files. He received a sentence long enough that people stopped calculating his age at release halfway through the judge's statement. When he was allowed to speak, he turned toward Hazel and said he was sorry. Hazel looked at him then. "You left the light on," she said. "You let me thank you for leaving the light on." The judge called for order, though the room had gone completely silent. After the trial, the house on Juniper Road did not sell for nearly a year. It sat empty through snow and dandelions, the porch light finally dark, the maple tree unburdened of posters. Children crossed the street rather than pass it at dusk. Adults pretended they did not. Eventually, a retired nurse bought it for less than it was worth, replaced the kitchen floor entirely, and planted lavender along the walk. She told people houses were not guilty. People were. Naomi was buried in September on a hill that overlooked neither the quarry nor Juniper Road. Hazel chose a plain marker. No long verse, no dramatic line. Just Naomi's name, her dates, and beneath them, the words from the inside of the ring. Always home. The ring itself did not go into the ground. It had spent enough time in the dark. After the appeals period, the sheriff's office released it to Hazel in a small evidence envelope, with the label peeled off as much as policy allowed. The band was cleaned, but not repaired. The dent remained. Under certain light, a pale trace of finish still clung near the edge, impossible to remove without scraping away more gold. Hazel kept it in a ceramic dish by her kitchen sink, not as a shrine exactly, but as an answer. When people came to the house and saw it, some asked if it hurt to have the ring there. Hazel would look at the small circle of worn gold and think of all the places people had insisted Naomi must be. The ridge, the quarry water, a stranger's car, a bus station, a life she had chosen without telling anyone. She would think of Caleb standing in the television studio asking the town to bring his wife home, while beneath the floor he had laid with his own hands the first true piece of her waited. Yes, Hazel said when people asked if it hurt, but it tells the truth. And in Ashwick, that became the thing people remembered after the trial faded, after Caleb's business sign came down, after Harlan found work in another county, after the ridge trails filled again with hikers who did not know which fence post once held a strip of green wool. They remembered that the lie had not been broken by a dramatic witness or a sudden confession or a voice from the dark. It had been broken by a contractor's pry bar, a lifted board, and a small gold circle that had stayed exactly where the night left it, under the floor of the man who kept saying she was gone.